Aloha and welcome back. I am excited to introduce you all to the person that's going to be introducing Aloha. Dr. Ryan Perroy joined Hilo in 2013. He is an associate professor in the Department of Geography and Environmental Science and the director of the Spatial Data Analysis and Visualization Research Lab, which we call SDAV, at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. He received his PhD in physical geography from the University of California at Santa Barbara and has continued his physical geography research here at Hilo, bringing in the latest and greatest powerful geoscience tools. And he has been shepherding undergraduates and graduate students in this work, creating our next generation of geospatial scientists. And so now, Ryan Perroy.
Hello, everyone. Elisa, mahalo nui for quite an introduction. I appreciate that. So yes, my name is Ryan Perroy, and it is my true honor and pleasure to introduce Aloha Kapono, who is really, I think, embodies a lot about what TCBES is supposed to do. And I see in this right up here that she's an aspiring Wahine scientist. I would say, Aloha to some degree has already made that, right? So we can always be better scientists, but Aloha is well on her way to doing that. And so it's really been a pleasure and an honor to work with her. Aloha will be talking a bit about the project that she's been helping us with. Aloha graduated from Hilo, Department of Geography and Environmental Science. The major in geography. I was her senior seminar professor and professor for a few other classes. And despite those experiences, she chose me to, be her mentor for her TCBES internship project. And her perspective, having grown up in Hilo, having grown up, just a few blocks from some of the study sites that we've included in this project, has been invaluable. And in addition to her, geospatial technical ability and skills, which are developing and getting better all the time. So Aloha is a wonderful person, and it's really been an honor to have her in our lab as a part of the contributing major part of the team and the culture of the lab. And so we appreciate her very much and excited to see this talk. So mahalo nui and aloha.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ryan Perroy, for that amazing introduction. I'll go ahead and start my presentation. Are you guys able to see that? Awesome. Okay. Well, aloha nui kako, everybody. My name is Aloha Kapono, and today it is my pleasure to share my TCBES internship project with you, entitled Chasing Coastlines, Mapping Coastal Areas of Hilo and Kona using Historical Aerial Photography. I'm very fortunate to have had so many components to my TCBES internship experience. Here I've broken them down into 5 sections for my presentation. First, I'll share a little background about myself and some of the influences that have guided me on this journey. Next, I will dive into my master's internship project, which was a collaboration between the Spatial Data Analysis and Visualizations Lab at Hilo and the County of Hawaii Planning Department. Then I'll talk about some other opportunities I had teaching remote imaging to Hawaii Island youth and volunteering at Kalaimano in Kona. And lastly, I will talk about my research voyage to Papahanam Moku last summer. I was born and raised in Hilo, Hawaii, and grew up with an ocean-loving family who enjoyed paddling canoe, fishing, diving, and surfing together. We were taught to be in balance with our environments and to respect Aina by spending time in nature and leaving it better than we found it, and by contributing our best selves to the collective for our island and ohana. These life lessons have shaped me into the Kanaka, Wahine, and scholar I am today. Hula has been an important part of my life since I was a little girl and has taught me many lessons, one of which are the countless ways of telling a story. Similarly, aerial image photogrammetry, as I realized, is in itself a form of storytelling, and similar to hula, can influence the way we see and appreciate the world. As a geographer, I'm curious about the stories that both cultural and physical maps represent and the relationships and meanings that are embedded in them. Globally, coastlines are highly diverse with widely varying geomorphic typologies. On Hawaii Island, there's approximately 430 kilometers of coastline area. Coastlines play a vital role as a defense system against damage from extreme weather, erosion, and storm runoff. However, with impending climate change, loss of coastal areas due to sea level rise is a serious issue globally, and particularly for islands. According to the recent 2021 Hawaii State Climate Change Assessment, Hilo Bay has experienced about 10 inches of sea level rise since the 1950s and is projected to experience continued sea level rise of 1 inch every 4 years. Sea cliffs likely make up over half of the Hawaii Island coastline and are subject to constant wave action and erosion. In areas with greater wave action, sea cliffs have retreated inland, leaving geological clues of sea level histories. Due to sea level rise, erosion, and stochastic events like storms and landslides, maintaining current records of shoreline areas is a challenge for agencies and community planners. Coastlines also host many natural resources and biocultural connections, which I will mention later in my talk. For my internship project, I created a series of contemporary shoreline maps and used historical aerial photos of coastlines on Hawaii Island to help us measure coastline changes over time. I took this picture of the Pauka'a coastline between Honali'i and Kapue in Hilo, Paliku, where sea cliff retreat and shoreline loss are actively happening. Due to the constant changes that coastal shorelines experience, defining shoreline area and their boundaries are not always clear. For this project, we define a coastal shoreline as a land that is at any time exposed above the waterline and subject to impacts of ocean surge and weathering. These areas are inclusive of marine and terrestrial communities. Shorelines include the Rocky Intertidal Zone, sandy and rocky beach, and ocean cliffs. This video shows a narrow swath of coastline surveyed along Hilo, Paliku. Many Kanaka Maoli are actively co-managing their community shoreline areas across Hawaii, exercising their native rights to land and disseminating Ike Hawaii. In these cases, coastal management is valued for subsistence to benefit community health and for exploration into commercial opportunities for sustainability. One of my long-term goals in this project is to support Hawaiian communities by developing mapping tools for Kanaka towards self-determination and resiliency. Coastal mapping is a powerful land management tool that is helping planners deal with impending coastal erosion and other challenges related to urbanization and climate change. Nearly 21.4 kilometers of beach loss has occurred statewide in Hawaii between 1975 and 2015. Shoreline hardening or shoreline armoring are terms referring to the addition of man-made reinforcements like retaining walls along shorelines to protect infrastructure. However, shoreline hardening does not protect against shoreline erosion and in some cases may exacerbate the effects of sea level rise. Monitoring long-term spatial changes is necessary to properly assess the efficacy of management decisions with coastal areas. Specifically on Hawaii Island, there's a great need for updated aerial imagery and maps of the island's coastal areas. Drastic variability in the landscape of Hawaii Island and lack of access to such areas has prevented the County of Hawaii from conducting thorough coastal hazard assessment and up-to-date coastal mapping of Hawaii Island. This project addresses the need for current data for comprehensive shoreline assessments for Hawaii Island. My internship project was designed to meet the needs of the County of Hawaii to assess how the island's shorelines have changed over the last 50 plus years, and to create updated comparison maps of shorelines in Hilo and Kona. I interned with Dr. Ryan Perroy, my mentor, in the Spatial Data Analysis and Visualizations Research Lab, or SDAV Lab, at UH Hilo to create and evaluate these maps of historic shoreline changes on Hawaiʻi Island. This video shows part of the process of capturing high-resolution imagery from a helicopter-mounted system. This project builds on a recent study by TCBES graduate Rose Hart, who examined historical shoreline changes at 3 beaches around Hawaiʻi Island. We generalized these maps for a larger area for archiving and map production and used a novel helicopter-mounted system, which to our knowledge was a new technique for capturing erosion imagery on such a large scale, specifically for Hawaiʻi Island. We acquired data from 2 spatially distinct areas of Hawaiʻi Island at risk for coastal erosion and performed an analysis of shoreline changes at both study sites. Our Kona survey, shown on the left, extended south from the old Kona airport and included the Kailua Pier, Ma'ihi Bay, and ended near the historic Kuamo'o battlefield in Keauhou. The Hilo survey, shown on your right, began at the Hilo airport and ran north of Bayfront to include Honoli'i and Kapue Stream in Papai'iko. Both survey regions encompass a 200-meter swath buffer, as shown by the green line in the maps. Here's a table showing the outline of the Comprehensive Shoreline Report, which was the final product of this project, as requested by the County of Hawaii. Highlighted in yellow are my contributions to the project. I helped with the time series analysis to quantify historic shoreline change for the 2 study sites, as well as assisted with preparation for helicopter flights, ground control surveying, and image processing. I also helped to identify areas of change along the Honoli'i Stream riparian zone. Part of this project was to create a library of historical air photos of these surveyed coastlines. We collected the historical air photos from the University of Hawaii at Manoa Maps, or MAGIS, and the County of Hawaii Archives. We only used pictures with a minimum resolution of less than 2 meters per pixel to control for photo quality. This is a table of the historical air photos and satellite imagery used in this study. Historical Kona photos were collected from 1975 and 1988. For the Hilo region, we collected photos from 1976, 1982, 1987, 2017, and 2018. To generate present-day maps, we used a helicopter-mounted imaging system to collect high-resolution imagery of the Hilo and Kona survey areas. We used Nikon DSLR cameras with GPS capabilities to capture high-resolution imagery with enhanced location precision. The camera system took pictures at 1-second intervals and at 150 to 250 meters above the ground. The helicopter flew at a forward speed of 15 meters per second, and the flight path of the helicopter allowed for a 60 to 80% image overlap. All flights were scheduled in the morning on clear and calm days and at low tide. We used survey-grade Trimble GPS equipment to collect our ground control points prior to the helicopter flights. Using real-time kinematic surveying methods, we surveyed ground control points within the expected extent of the aerial imagery. A total of 54 ground control points were collected in the Hilo, and 60 ground control points were collected in Kona. All survey ground control points were chosen at specific locations so that points were evenly distributed across the study area. After collection, data was processed to generate differentially corrected ground control points using a geospatial program called Trimble Business Center. Orthomosaics are spatially corrected photographs that are rectified to remove distortion due to recorder and topographic variability. Once all of our aerial images were collected, we digitally stitched them together to create a continuous orthomosaic of the survey area using Pix4D software. The program was then able to produce a GPS point cloud and spatially characterize the final orthomosaic. After our orthomosaics were completed, we were able to quantify coastline changes. First, we compared the historical orthomosaics to current 2021 orthos and visually inspected the maps for disparities. Areas where there were obvious changes between past and present maps were flagged and processed using the Digital Shoreline Analysis System, or DSAS program. To calculate change rates, 2021 mean sea level shorelines were used. A baseline was set at 20 meters back, Makai, from the shoreline level. A perpendicular transect from the baseline, Maukasai, was set using the DSAS transect generation tool. Intersection points were generated between the transect and the shoreline at 2-meter intervals. By overlapping historic imagery with current imagery and geo-registering points in ArcGIS, we created a time series for each survey area, showing coastal changes from the mid-1970s to present day. In the time series shown here, there are 3 panels of the same area along the Hilo coastline. The first panel on the left shows the overlapping historic and current imagery. Each red point is a specific location I identified to geographically link the images in a process called geo-registering. Panels 2 and 3 are side-by-side comparisons of the historic and current images of the area. These photos show an ideal situation where it was easy to link these specific structures and landmarks between the photos. If the houses were demolished or vegetation had covered more of the coastline, then it would have been more difficult to geo-reference these areas. There are many results, but I will only discuss 2 of our main findings here. Our results of the Kona area showed 4 specific shoreline areas along Ali'i Drive, which comprised of coarse pebbly sediment, had experienced significant shoreline loss in our time series analysis. However, in general, most of the Kona coastline did not experience shoreline loss in our time series. We believe this is the result likely due to the resistance of volcanic lava flows to rapid rates of erosion and little soil cover. In this Kona time series image, you can see there has not been much shoreline change from 1975 to 2021, despite additional housing development. For the Hilo area, we found that most of the shoreline change during our study's time series occurred at the sandy Honoli'i River mouth, but these changes were not attributable to sea level rise. Rocky areas farther away from the river mouth had little to no net shoreline change, particularly in areas with bouldery beaches. However, sea cliff retreat was observed in the Hilo survey area and deemed a major factor related to coastline change. We determined that finer resolution imagery provides a higher depiction of cliff profiles for the sea cliff retreat analysis. From historical air photos from 1976, various areas along the North Hilo transect had up to 5 meters of sea cliff retreat. Here is an example of a seawall installation along the Kona shoreline. There were only 2% and 4% hardening areas included in the Kona and Hilo survey sites, respectively. As such, it was not possible to determine specifically what effects structures like seawalls will have in the future in these areas. Collecting up-to-date aerial imagery of Ali'i Drive in Kona and the Honoli'i Hilo area is instrumental in the planning and implementation of decision-making for the County of Hawaiʻi. The cohesive contributions of scientific research and work from Hilo will be paramount in establishing resilience of the coastal areas of East and West Hawaiʻi. I'm going to go ahead and let this video play. For more information about this project, you can check out our recent publication shown here, which was submitted to the County of Hawaiʻi Planning Department. We look forward to this work being integrated into future land use planning on the island. I'd like to transition now into some of the other opportunities I've had as a graduate student at Hilo. First, I will focus on some teaching work I did in collaboration with the Makali'i crew, na Kalaiwa'a, and with Dr. Hanani Kane in Kauai High, Kohala. Last summer, I led an interactive workshop with students from Kamehameha schools. We created an investigation of different coral types by assessing their different morphologies and health using an underwater remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, to collect videos. I think these students were really engaged with the work and found themselves more curious about science and STEM. This was a great huaka'i at Kauai High. Next, I will discuss the field work that was conducted at Kalaimano in preparation for my expedition to Papahanam Mokuakea. The capstone of my graduate experience was definitely my experience to Papahanam Mokuakea last summer. I was honored to have been invited as part of the first ever All Kanaka Maoli science research team with my friends and Ohana pictured in the center bottom photo. From the left to right, there's myself, Cami Tavares, Dr. Haunani Kane, Christian McDonald, Kainalu Stewart, and Lauren Kapono on your right. These other pictures were taken during our training days at Kalaimano in Kona. We fine-tuned our ground control point methods, ROV and drone operations, and remote imaging collection techniques in preparation for Lalo. We were also trained to conduct productivity and carrying capacity surveys, or PAC, on Opihi. This method was created by the Aina Stewardship Organization, Namaka o Nauna, which focuses on community health and wellness while striving for Aina Momona. Next, I will talk about my 15-day research expedition in Papahanam Mokuakea. At Papahanam Mokuakea, I was tasked with leading the collection and post-processing of sediment samples at different locations throughout the atoll of Lalo, also known as French Frigate Shoals. I collected underwater, near shore, and inland samples to assess the geological composition of the island. I also played a support role in collecting GPS coordinates, video surveys of coral reefs, and helped to facilitate scientific discussion amongst our team. We're not only researchers, but also crew members on board Makani Olu, which is a 96-foot triple-masted schooner. This came with the responsibilities of keeping watch during the nights and days, steering the vessel, kitchen duties, and hourly engine checks. As we entered the monument, our crew immediately performed entrance protocols. We offered lei, vai from our own islands, maunas, rivers, and offered oli and sang mele. This was ultimately one of the most memorable moments because we didn't need to explain ourselves or have the need to describe what we were doing. We just did it. We came together as Hawaiʻi. Here are the moku or islands we visited throughout our time in Papahanam Mokuakea. We visited Kamohoali'i or La Perouse Pinnacle, Turn Island, Lalo Puleva and Lalo Kini, Kahikina or East Island, and lastly, Nihoa. Sailing up to Papahanam Mokuakea, I embraced these new sands and stones as not only a beautiful place, but also as a new part of me. I was seeing this place and myself in a new light. I was humbled to be in the presence of our most ancient ancestors, our oldest kupuna, and at the cusp of Ao and Po. On our return home, we stopped briefly at Nihoa, where our youngest crew member, Hanale Keali'i Ho'omalu's great-grandfather was born. These islands embraced and will forever captivate us. Now, when I think of myself navigating through the complex and challenging world of STEM, I will think of the waters of Papahanam Mokuakea and find strength. My research projects on shoreline mapping, cultural and natural resource management, and environmental stewardship have culminated into a much broader experience of personal growth and opportunity over the past 2 years. I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Ryan Perroy and the entire Spatial Data and Visualizations Lab for allowing me the opportunity to learn from them. I'm also grateful to Lisa Canali for her kind support and guidance as my academic advisor over the past 2 years. A special thank you to the Ha'olimaoloa Foundation, the University of Hawaii at Hilo, Dr. Haunani Kane, Dr. John Burns at the Multi-Scale Environmental Graphical Analysis Laboratory, or the Mega Lab. A huge mahalo goes out to my ohana, my wonderful Dr. Chris Dai, and everyone in the TCBES cohort for immensely supporting me through this program. Hey, Mauni now, are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Aloha. That was wonderful. If you have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself. And if we have a lineup of questions, please use the icon, the raise your hand icon that you can find under the reactions at the bottom of the screen. So who would like to ask the first question? All right, Matt, please unmute yourself and ask away.
How's it, Aloha? Great presentation. I love to see the work that you've done. I'm just curious what your future entails as far as you using your work towards a better future for Kanaka.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, and good morning. Thank you for joining today. So in terms of my personal career, it's really been attributed to these past couple years being in the program and my desire to work in conservation, specifically looking at shoreline environments. And also grateful for the opportunities of working with the SDEV Lab and other professors that have taught me really new cool technologies to take into my future. And so I think by myself as a Kanaka and investing into knowledge systems and learning new innovative tools to build my skill sets, I think in that it helps Hawaii in a whole. Thank you, Matt.
All right, thank you, Matt. And does anybody else have a question for Aloha? I think we have a few shy people in the audience. Oh, okay. Celia, please unmute yourself.
Aloha, aloha. I just wanted to ask, I really loved the teaching part of your internship experience. And so how did you think about that experience of teaching, students, and did that affect your thinking about your project in ways that you may have overlooked or didn't know before until you actually did that teaching experience? Yeah, I just love that part of it, because oftentimes, we look at knowledge as just something we learn, but not something to perpetuate. So that part of the internship was a really good component, I thought. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Celia. I was really fortunate to be asked by Dr. Hanani Kane to participate in this experience of teaching and hanging out really with the kids down at Kauai High. And so I just thought it would be really cool to just invest my time not only in academia and studies, but outreach and fostering those relationships with Keiki and with other leading scientists that are of the community over in different districts. And so I definitely agree with you. It did contribute to my entire experience in ways that I didn't think it would. And so I really appreciate having those opportunities to take what I learn and then apply it outside of a normal classroom.
All right, thank you. Sharon, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, aloha, aloha. This is so wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciated your presentation, and it's been really fun to watch where you've come from and where you've gone. And I was looking at, when you were with Pipes a long time ago, you were in the mountains, right? You were doing Moka. You were in the forest. You're looking at birds, and now you're on the coast. But you're learning all these tools of stories. I love that connection. So, what are the recommendations, or I guess two questions. One, how do you see these tools that you've learned, et cetera, extending from Makai to Moka or Moka to Makai? And secondly, what advice would you give to those folks who are interested in telling the stories of this place? Are these based on your journey, what would you recommend for those who are excited about this but not sure where to start? That's a really big question.
Thank you, Sharon. Nice to see you. I guess to immediately answer your last question of how do people connect and start, I would say to, pipes is a really great place to start. And I think that's where early on my conservation and environmental relation, like me wanting to have that relationship with that field and go into that on that path kind of started. So the pipes internship was such a amazing experience, and I did it twice. So the first time I was mentored by Dr. Noelani Punivai, and we were down by the coastline, and so that was like beautiful. The second time I did the pipes internship, I was Mauka doing Elipayo research, and so that was completely different. And so that I'm able to have these projects that I work on that are very different in terms of, am I looking at a species? Am I looking at a landscape? Am I looking at seascapes? Really allows me to build my, my tools, tool sets, and allow me to think in ways that are different. So I think staying on that track and just diligently continuing to put myself in these programs or in these discussions and kind of come out of my comfort zone, I think has gave me such a big return. And so I think by putting yourself in those spaces of uncertainty, like, do I fit in this space? Most oftentimes you do. And so it's in yourself to kind of have that confidence to go out and learn and grow and not be scared of and or intimidated of new technologies or latest and greatest tools. Like, we can definitely dive into it, and it all starts with step one. So we just start from there and then see where it takes you.
That's great, Manao. And just to follow up, how do you see these tools if we're looking at changing climate, changing landscapes in response to various impacts, right? Climate change being one of them. Do you see these tools going from Mauka to Makai?
I believe they have already been applied, Mauka and Makai, and I think there are many people that are using unmanned aerial systems, or unoccupied, drones and aerial photogrammetry techniques to better understand areas remotely that you're not able to access due to like hazard environments, whatever it may be. So using, I believe, like remotely sensed techniques could be a great way to integrate monitoring, surveys, understanding change over time in large swaths of area. So I believe that it is being applied already on many different projects. And so it's really awesome to meet other people that are doing similar work, whether it is Mauka, whether it's Makai, whether it's Mauka to Makai. So I think people are doing really amazing things, and it's also about building those relationships with people and collaborating really with those people and building that pilina.
Mahalo that you got to that point. Yeah, that point at the when you're talking about that, it is all about those relationships, and it's really exciting to see. Thank you.
Mahalo nui, everybody.
All right. Well, we have time for one more question. Does anybody have one that they would like to ask? Okay, I'm going to ask then one that was from a graduate student who's being a little bit shy. This question is from Whitney Springer. And the question is, with the coastline changes that you've seen, how concerned are you about the effects of erosion in the coastal community in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, that is a great question. So the issues of sea level rise and coastal erosion are unfortunately here already and will exacerbate in the near future. And so we're experiencing impacts to coastal wetlands, businesses, the economy, and our beaches. And Hawaiʻi will need solutions at the individual, local, state, and federal levels to protect its coastline communities. Thank you, Whitney.